Way back when, before life kicked my ass, I used to think that spirituality was this magical thing that was going to give me all kinds of superpowers, solve all my problems, make me omniscient, know everything, make me omnipotent, all powerful, able to click my fingers and manifest whatever I wanted without any effort or work. I was buying into a kind of brainwashing, which was just supporting all of the things that my ego needed to stop me from growing. The ego wants us to be all powerful and all knowing, but that's because it's about shame. And I realized I was buying into it because I was trying to convince myself that I'd escaped mainstream brainwashing because I wasn't an NPC. But over the years I realized it was just keeping me in ego. It was stopping me facing my shadow, and I just bought into a kind of NPC spirituality where I was following all kinds of scripts but not growing in any meaningful way. That's what this video is about. The rise of NPC spirituality and how to get real instead. If you don't know, an NPC is a non-playable character in a video game. It's the people that kind of exist in those virtual worlds that are not really people. The player has no control over them. They just kind of follow a script. There's no sense of presence, just programming. No sense of consciousness, just conditioning. And when it comes to NPC spirituality, it's exactly the same thing. Just like we have NPCs in relation to the world who have been programmed by all the stuff in the media or by school or whatever it is, we have people in spiritual world following scripts in exactly the same way. And at the heart of it is always the heart of what always leads to the ego: shame. Shame that leads to them following the scripts of the ego in order to keep the shadow self at bay, but also the kind of shame that makes their ego invest and identify in a certain point of view, social programming that gives them a sense of safety and security, but that has nothing to do with reality. And so an NPC is just someone who follows those two kind of scripts. The scripts they hypnotize themselves with because of their fragmented relationship with themselves at the level of the ego, and the scripts that their society or subculture tells them to follow. If you're following your programming and you're not present, you're always going to be disconnected from yourself and you're going to live like an NPC. If you want to wake up, there's only one way to do it, and it's what we're going to talk about in this video. The alternative to following these scripts and being an NPC, just been programmed by your ego and by society or some unreal culture or subculture, is pretty simple. But even though it's simple, it's not easy, so not everyone does it. The first way is that you live in two main ways. You uncover the truth and then you live the truth. You keep testing your assumptions about yourself, your beliefs, all that kind of stuff. You stay curious and you dig deeper into seeing what's actually going on. The alternative is that you don't do that, and then eventually life is going to cause you to come crashing back down to earth. You'll have a dark night of the soul or something like that. But basically what it means is you're going to hit rock bottom, and then you're going to find something true down there, and you're going to have to rebuild. If you avoid either of those two ways of doing it, then you're just going to kind of float around in this unreal world of being an NPC, where you're just going through the motions and not really having a real relationship with yourself or life. And so ultimately, all of this comes down to the idea that the alternative to following the scripts blindly, living on autopilot, is to actively start following the truth and finding it. The dangerous thing about NPC spirituality is that it's dressed up as the quest for truth because it's a reaction to all of the mainstream NPC activities that go on in the world. And so what happens is people buy into NPC spirituality and think that because they've been reactionary and going against the mainstream, it means they've woken up. But actually that couldn't be further from the truth, because an unreal script is always an unreal script, and it always leads to the same place, the ego. The alternative to waking up and using the truth to reconfigure your relationship with yourself and life so you can let some light in instead of being weighed down by all the fragmentation that's caused by being split from ourselves. The alternative is to follow the two kinds of scripts that people follow and stay stuck by and end up becoming NPCs. The first is what I said, the shame. The underlying shame always leads to ego. The ego rests upon shame. And so if we're not willing to face our shame, which means we're gonna start to face the shadow self and to integrate ourselves and become real, then we just end up playing all these little loops over and over again that are the ego's attempt to defend us and to keep us stuck where we don't want to be. The other script that we end up following to be an NPC is social programming. And this can be mainstream social programming, buying into all the bullshit that we get sold through the media, blah, blah, blah. But it's also any untested assumptions that we pick up collectively and feel that we have to buy into, which is why NPC spirituality can exist as well. Because there are all kinds of unreal, untested assumptions in the spiritual world that seem like they're antithetical to the mainstream way of doing things, but really they're keeping people locked inside themselves, just like the mainstream does as well. The underlying similarities between the NPC mainstream and the NPC spirituality subculture are why people who follow both end up being unreal. Unreal in the sense that they outsource their thinking to somebody else. They're driven by shame instead of they're dissolving their shame and becoming free. They chase identity and ego over an experience of something real. They resist the truth and all of the stuff hiding in the shadows. They become control freaks. They get really attached to their beliefs as though their beliefs are the truth, because their ego needs the beliefs to be true so they can keep avoiding themselves. etc, etc, etc. All of this stuff underlies mainstream NPCs and the spiritual NPCs. And it's because neither of them are real. Real is about not outsourcing your thinking and actually getting into an experience of moving towards wholeness. And that's something you can only do directly in relationship with life by putting yourself out of your comfort zone and taking the actions that are down there in your shadow trying to get out, and by learning to flow instead of forcing life through the ego. And so whether you're mainstream or you're spiritual, if your ego is dependent on some image and some programming that comes from the philosophy that you follow without even realizing, then you're in the same boat. Whether you think you're avoiding the mainstream or not, you've been programmed and you become distanced from your own capacity to be present. Really, whether you follow NPC mainstream ideology or you follow the NPC spiritual ideology, you're bypassing your emotions. One is just regular bypassing because it's mainstream. The other is spiritual bypassing because it's wearing different robes. But in both cases, they need the ideology that they're unconsciously following in order to keep their emotions at bay. It's all about the ego and the shadow self. The ego is invested in the point of view, the ideology, the way of seeing the world, and the shadow is locked behind it. And this is why so many people get really worked up if you question the belief systems that they have. If people really know that what they believe is true, they don't actually freak out and get worked up if you disagree with them, because they know that it's true. And so they don't need to get defensive. They don't actually suspect that your criticism or disagreement with their little ideology holds any weight, and so they're not really bothered. But a lot of these NPCs in the mainstream and the spiritual type of NPCs, because they're so brainwashed, they get really worked up. And it's because their brainwashing is defending them in the short term from their own emotional stuff. But the only way that they can become free and real and actually find a sense of peace is by not fearing the truth, but uncovering it and living it, just like I said. Having an ideology as something that our ego becomes invested in order to keep the shadow at bay is one of the reasons that so many spiritual NPCs eventually end up becoming narcissistic. It's because narcissism is always fueled by shame, unresolved shame. And so the narcissist, in order to compensate for the shame, creates this big, grandiose image of themselves, which is supposed to counterbalance the feelings of smallness or worthlessness that they feel because of the shame inside. And this is why so many spiritual NPCs, when they get extreme about it, they end up thinking that they have special powers, or that their psychic predictions about your life, which are really just projection of their stuff, have weight or truth. It's why they feel like their beliefs are literally the truth and not just interpretations of the truth. And this is why they cling to them as well. Instead of seeing beliefs as something that can keep changing and evolving as we go deeper into uncovering the truth and living the truth, they cling to it because it's all they've got. Because they haven't got that real foundation in themselves, because they've been driven by the shame instead of the realness. And this is why the NPC, even though they might look like it all kind of works out for them and makes sense on the surface, is really like a duck swimming across the lake or something, a lake. It looks like they're calm and placid, but beneath the surface of the water, their legs are going crazy. They're fighting for survival, and that's why they ultimately need to keep believing and following the NPC scripts, because they don't know who they'd be without the script, and they feel like without the script, even though they think it's not a script, they feel like without it, they're just gonna basically lose everything and no longer know how to exist or survive. There are quite a lot of symptoms and signs that come along with being a spiritual NPC. I'll go over some of them really quickly right now in this video. The first one is that they come with a lot of spiritual jargon, but they don't really embody it. So they're going to talk about vibrations and all kinds of things like this. But really, if you look at them, because they're disconnected from their realness, there's probably not going to be that much of an embodied vibration of higher level being or enlightenment or anything. Instead, they're probably going to be complaining a lot of the time. They're going to be low energy. They're going to be starting drama. And all of that spiritual jargon that they use is just completely unreal. It's part of the mask. Another really common symptom of the NPC spiritualist is that they're going to take a really performative approach to their spirituality instead of being present. And so what this means is they're simultaneously going to play the victim whilst also trying to come across as being enlightened. And what this looks like is a big performance where they're basically asking you to give them a round of applause for all of the shadow work they've been doing, all of the difficult things they've been going through because of Mercury retrograde or whatever. And they're going to keep coming across as this enlightened being of light that constantly has one problem after another that they're actively playing a victim role around, because their victim mentality is allowing them to stay locked in the ego and not take the real action that's actually going to carry them deeper into the truth and into wholeness, and allow them to at least get more flow in their lives and to start feeling better about life. Another symptom is one we already talked about, which is that they're going to keep bypassing, emotional bypassing, spiritual bypassing. They don't want to feel any pain. They won't accept that life comes with pain. No matter how spiritual you are, you're going to have moments where there's difficult and painful things to deal with. And so this kind of interlinks with the spiritual jargon, but instead of just accepting that they feel bad about things, or that they failed in some way, or that things aren't working out as they planned, or whatever it is, they're going to suppress it all and try and mask it behind control freakery and visions of light and all of these things that make it seem like they're living in a kind of la-la Disneyland, rather than just facing where they are right now so that they can accept it and build something real. All of these symptoms are kind of interrelated, and they all go back to the underlying shame, guilt and or trauma that drives them. But another one is that they're going to keep claiming consciousness and enlightenment, or whatever it is that whatever word they end up using, but their nervous systems are going to be totally dysregulated. And so they're going to be stuck in fight or flight mode, which means that they're constantly going to be seeing threats everywhere. They're constantly going to be on edge. They're constantly getting involved in drama and catastrophes. They're not facing their own emotions, like I've said, because the nervous system sees all their inner stuff as a threat, which just exacerbates the ego. In the worst cases, the nervous system is going to go into pure freeze mode for a sustained period of time, which means they're just going to get stuck and locked behind the ego even more. Normally this is because they were almost on the edge of growing through or reconfiguring their current identity, but then they couldn't quite make the push because the nervous system saw it as a threat, and so they shut down. But the point is, even though the nervous system is going to be so dysregulated, which is going to keep you out of the flow of life and moving towards the truth, because the only way you can move towards the truth is actually if you have a regulated nervous system, because moving towards the truth is always going to involve facing uncertainty and doubt and new terrain. And so if you see threats everywhere, that's basically going to be impossible. And so anyway, if their nervous system's dysregulated and they keep telling you how enlightened they are, you can be pretty sure that something's gone wrong and they become an NPC in the spiritual world. Another symptom is that they're going to keep confusing their trauma impulses and the way that their trauma is still affecting them with intuition. What this basically means is that their trauma has affected the nervous system once again. It's put them in a state of hypervigilance, and so they're constantly looking for little patterns and things like this unconsciously that remind them of traumatic situations they've been through. Of course, that's not their fault because trauma freezes us in time, but what it means is that when they tell themselves it's intuition, and so they don't take action, or they take an action that's just going to keep them in the comfort zone, or that's just going to reinforce the ego, what they're actually doing is tricking themselves into thinking that their trauma, which is keeping them stuck, is actually moving them forward, or keeping them in a place where they think they want to be, but which is actually just causing the shame and all that kind of stuff to linger. And so a lot of the time, when all these spiritual NPCs think they have the greatest intuition in the world, sometimes even having those psychic powers and stuff like I was talking about, well, what's actually going on is their trauma is directing their view of the future and keeping them locked, frozen in the present because of what's gone on in the past. Another really common symptom of the spiritual NPC is that they get addicted to knowledge. And so they're always taking courses, they're always reading these books that all the other NPCs are reading, of course, but they never take action. They just constantly filling their heads with conceptual knowledge, but because they don't take the conceptual knowledge off the page and into their lives, all it ends up doing is reinforcing the ego that's caused them to be stuck in the first place. And so they're just reading books, etc., going on courses that make their programming have an even stronger hold over them. There's probably millions of symptoms that the NPC spiritual acolyte follows, but the final one we'll talk about in this video is that instead of taking real action, which is what's actually going to change their lives and allow them to see themselves in the shadow, because anytime you take action, especially real action, you get real feedback from reality about what you need to change, what you need to evolve through, etc. Instead of taking that kind of real action, they just try and manifest everything. I'm not saying that manifestation and the law of attraction are real. I'll save that for another time. But even if you believe in the law of attraction, you need to take action. If you don't take action, which is the most advanced form of theory, then you're just basically lost within the hamster wheel in your mind, trying to make life conform to you instead of working with it. And it goes back to what I said right at the start. These people that are obsessed with manifestation without taking real action are trying to be omniscient and omnipotent. It's almost like they're thinking like little kids, toddlers, who think that they're the center of the universe. And they think that if they press the right buttons, etc., treat the universe like a vending machine, then they can just get whatever they want, whenever they want it, in a way that they want it, which is really just the way their ego has told them it should be, as they filter everything through ego. And so they turn manifestation and the law of attraction and all that stuff into just a way of projecting their ego out into life and making themselves believe that the laws of nature reflect the laws of the ego, which couldn't be further from the truth. The good news is that whether you're an NPC or not, reality is always there. Beyond the programming, beyond all the scripts. It's just there when you start being present and put yourself in life instead of performing your way through life. The best way that I have found to start reconnecting is to go through a 3-step process that really never ends, because it's a spiral thing that you can keep going through spirals of. But anyway, it's a 3-step process that I talk about in my books and with my coaching clients. Awareness, acceptance, and action. Awareness means that you deconstruct the ego. In this case, that you start to pay attention to all of the programming, the scripts, the things that are stopping you being present in your own life. The second is acceptance. Acceptance means integrating the shadow. Beyond all the programming and the scripts of the ego, there's the real you waiting to come forth. It's all of the qualities that you've hidden about yourself, all of your goals, all of your values, all of your true beliefs, away from the social programming and the NPC things about you. All of that stuff is waiting. When you get rid of the programs, it'll start bursting up. And then the final stage is action, which also means that you learn to trust yourself and trust life instead of trusting the programming, which is never going to work. It gives you a false sense of security, but it never ever can get you where you really want to be, which is to uncover the truth and then live it. The bottom line when it comes to all this is that spirituality is a real thing. Spirituality is the truth. It's that simple. It's an alignment with the truth. And so you can't find it if you're running on programs and emotional resistance, etc., that keeps you from the truth. It's also not about being special. NPC spirituality becomes a thing because when people are shame-driven, they need to feel special. And buying into that kind of bullshit, that we can be omniscient and omnipotent, is one of the easiest ways to feel special. We get some esoteric knowledge that makes us feel superior to those that don't have it. We learn some esoteric rituals, like sticking our fingers in our belly buttons, or whistling at the moon, playing with our crystals. And maybe in some cases that can work, I'm not saying it can't. But for the NPC spiritualist, it becomes more about the ritual than the realness. And at the end of the day, that's what all of this boils down to. You've either been real with yourself, which is going to become spiritual in some way, although the spirituality part doesn't need to be a part of your identity, or you're going to keep hiding from yourself. You're going to be unreal and let those programs and scripts cause you to attach to ideologies and philosophies that have no connection to anything real, keep you on the hamster wheel of the ego, and cause you to never find all of the amazing truths about yourself that are buried in the shadow self. The only way out is to break the script. Whether you're a mainstream NPC follower or a spiritual NPC follower, you need to raise your awareness, deconstruct the ego, accept yourself by integrating the shadow, and then take real action that's going to allow you to forget about the scripts and programs and to find presence in the flow of real life. So that was a video about NPC spirituality, a version of spirituality, if you even want to call it that just keeps you locked within your own programming and your own ego resistance. If you want to really grow and you want to put yourself in a relationship with yourself and life that is actually on a foundation of something real, where you don't need to keep trying to hide from yourself or tricking yourself into thinking that you're looking at yourself when really you're just looking at your ego projected out into the world, then the only way to do it is to do what I said a couple of times in this video. Uncover the truth and live the truth. Of course, that comes with its own costs. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off and make you miserable, as you have to let go of all your illusions that you've become comfortable with and identified with. But once you do, or at least start to put yourself in the process of doing that, then you'll see that you don't need all of these little indirect ways of trying to connect with some higher spiritual force. You don't need your crystals necessarily. You don't need anything, because you know it's not about all this created stuff, as they say. It's about the creator, the wholeness that is imbued in all things, and that you can tap into and start flowing with simply by letting go of all that ego programming and the social programming. So anyway, I'm kind of lost in these woods, probably a metaphor of some kind. Risky business making these videos. I could die out here, but if I do, I do. There's a nice big ass green rock here. Don't know if you can see it because I actually can't see myself on the camera right now. But anyway, I hope this video helped you. If anyone wants to talk to me about the kind of stuff we talked about in this video today, or anything else that you've seen on this channel, you can book a call on my website. In the meantime, stay real out there. Keep looking for the truth. Keep living the truth, not the interpretation of the truth or other people's interpretations, including mine. And you'll probably get where you want to be. So I hope that helped, and peace to you.